Hi, you're listening to the Taking Ground podcast, connecting you to the many excellent churches, ministries and people within our wider family. You can keep up to date with the latest from Taking Ground at takingground.org.uk and never miss an episode of this podcast by hitting subscribe. But for now, here's your host, Rachel Broughton.
This is a special one for me today because I'm sitting in my living room with a very special friend of mine, Alison.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
It's so nice to actually be talking to you and giving you a space to share your story, because we've journeyed it quite a lot, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
Over the years.
Yeah.
And it's a big thing to share your story. It's so personal and so intimate, really, and the things that God's done in your life and the ways that your life's changed because of your found faith and because of what God's done is amazing, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm excited to be able to bring that and share that with more people, really.
Lovely, me too, thank you.
Oh, I'm excited. Do you want to share how you first came to meet me, but really meet the Sunderland Community Church, the church that you're a part of now, but also Jesus? Do you want to share a little bit?
Yeah. So I actually originally met Rachel through two very dear friends of mine, Andrew and Eunice Palmer. I was doing activities at the Methodist Church, which was the St Andrew's Centre, which then became Sunderland Community Church, but back then was St Andrew's Centre Methodist Circuit. It wasn't a part of the church or the congregation, but did actually go and do activities with the kids of the area.
Some of the community stuff that they were doing,
yeah. And at the time was actually heavily involved with spiritualism.
Yeah.
After a really overwhelming experience that I'd had with Jesus a few years before that. We'll come to that in a second. But Eunice actually coached me and supported me and took me away from the spiritualism side. And we did a lot of things, studies and Bible studies at her house, and she was just lovely, so lovely. And then when she told me she was going to be leaving St Andrews to move away to be with family, she said, I've got a couple of young people coming up to Sunderland to plant a church, and I think you would really, really get along with them. At this point, I'd not declared my life to Jesus, hadn't said I want to become a Christian or anything, was just literally just journeying with Eunice and doing the studies. And then along came you, Rachel and Matt, and that's how we met.
Yeah, amazing. So this overwhelming experience with Jesus, I just feel massively intrigued by that. And I'm sure everyone listening is like, what overwhelming experience with Jesus? Tell us.
So, as a child, I was born and raised on a council estate. My mum and dad were separated. Dad, alcoholic. Mum didn't do me any intentional harm, but there was kind of no emotional connection there at all. And I felt like the whole of my life I was kind of like searching for something. I always wanted other people's parents to be my parents, and I just needed that love, that connection, something, and it just wasn't there. No fault of me mum's, it was all she'd ever known. You can't, you just go by what you're taught, don't you? And this is how my family pattern was from my dad's side and my mum's side, the generations before us. Just the same patterns year in, year out, and nothing really changed. So there was no talk of God, Jesus, any religion as I was growing up. And sadly, as a child, I was actually sexually abused by a family member. Loved this family member dearly. As a child, you don't know that that's wrong. Getting into my teenage years, I started dabbling with drugs. Obviously, that didn't know then, but it was obviously a coping mechanism. Tried lots of different things recreationally with friends, and it just developed and developed. My mental health hit a huge slippery slope, I suppose.
It's interesting now looking back on that and sort of seeing the spiral. Now you're not in that, but seeing how easy it is to just fall into that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. People some people could judge, and you know, well, you did have a choice, you didn't have to take that. Well, you don't actually realise at the time that that's happening to you. No. And at the time I didn't know why. I couldn't see the effects of the sexual abuse and why I was doing those destructive things.
Sure.
I didn't love myself. I had no self-worth. Obviously didn't get that connection from my home either. So just anyway ended up in this awful pattern of destruction. And then at my mum and I had a bit of a difficult time when I was around 16, and I eventually ended up moving into a bedsit with, at the time, my very first boyfriend. Such a young age when I look back, it was actually a week before my 16th birthday.
Gosh, because how old's your oldest now?
He's 17.
He's 17, can you imagine?
Never.
Wow.
Never. So I still managed to get myself through college and stuff while I was living in this bedsit, but obviously following these awful destructive patterns. At the age of 19, couldn't cope any longer with, I'd not spoken to anybody about the sexual abuse.
Yeah.
So hit the age of 19, and obviously with the drug taking and everything else, it was just a spiral it was awful. It was absolutely awful. I can't begin to explain. I knew I didn't want to be that way, but I couldn't stop being that way.
Yeah. When you're in a pattern where you're just doing what you've always done, you're the way you've always known, and everyone around you is the same. Like, you're not seeing a different way.
Yeah, that was totally it. And I was functioning, so I was working, and I was going to college, and nobody knew that I was using drugs. Nobody knew. I was kind of deathly skinny. When I look back and look at photographs, I think to myself, how did somebody not recognise what was happening with us and just kind of like scoop us up and save us? But that didn't happen. But then decided I was going to report my abuser to the police.
Wow, that's such a huge step. What gave you the courage to? What made you think, I've got to do this?
I was fed up of thinking in my mind, he's done this to me, but I was also terrified at what the general public might think. Would they think I was disgusting? It was awful. It was horrible. And I definitely think it was probably drug induced that I decided to go to the police, because I was at such a height all of the time. Just couldn't handle anything whatsoever. Couldn't handle life. Was losing jobs, dropping out of college, and it eventually. And I could have continued, but I didn't. I just wasn't coping whatsoever. And then decided I was just going to ring the police on a whim this particular night. And my actual words to the police were, if somebody doesn't come and take a statement from me, I won't be responsible for what I do, because I was starting to want revenge.
Right, yeah.
What can I do? What can I do to get this man convicted? He did this to me. I didn't know how old I was, didn't know how it started, didn't know when it stopped. I was so confused. Yeah. So actually the police came. I was took through a series of interviews, recorded, on my own, sadly.
I was going to say, that's such a traumatic process to go through on your own.
It was, yeah.
It's such a big thing to do.
It was awful. It was like, somebody should have been there to hold my hand. Yes, 19, but you're still effectively childlike at 19, So they arrested him, and the Crown Prosecution Service looked at the case, and he spoke of how I was a drug user and whatever else, and sadly the Crown Prosecution Service decided that they weren't going to take the case.
Wow.
Because I wouldn't have been a credible witness on the stand because of the drug use. Bearing in mind at the time, yes, it was awful, but I was a functioning drug addict, so it wasn't like I was all over the place, couldn't talk, couldn't anything. But anyway, that was how it worked back then. So thankfully it's different now, and survivors are listened to. So because of the fact that he wasn't charged, the side of my family that he belongs to totally went against me and threatened me, and were going to do this, that and the other to me, and awful. It was awful. I was so afraid, so scared, that the police put me in a refuge in Bishop Auckland.
Wow, okay.
It was only supposed to be for a week or two, but once I was there I felt quite safe. I was terrified it was going to come out in the papers, and again, what are people going to think?
Yeah.
But I totally just decided that, right, this is it, I'm just going to stay here. Found myself a really good apprenticeship at Bishop Auckland College and started that. Found a friendship group, lovely supportive people, but again in those destructive patterns.
Sure.
You know, doing the things that they'd only ever known.
So you're only finding people who sort of encourage or at least affirm those patterns in your own life, aren't you? So yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
So kind of stuck in that cycle again. Did actually refrain from using drugs apart from when I went out on a weekend, but I literally couldn't go out and have fun without taking something. That was my lifestyle. Got through my apprenticeship, but just near the end my sister got taken into care because of my dad's alcoholism and his new wife's alcoholism. And sadly that just again knocked me for six. Didn't know where she was.
And triggered all of that instability in you. Yeah,
totally. Didn't quite make the last section of my apprenticeship, so didn't get the qualification because that's just when that had hit.
Alison,
but
so frustrating, all these
really,
things, just so many knocks that just take you right back, don't they? And they trigger all those responses and frustrations. Wow.
And I think the whole time that I was in Bishop Auckland, you know, I just wanted someone to come and take us home. Yeah. That was the sad thing, like why didn't anybody come and take us home? But that's the way it was and that's how it's gone. And I ended up with quite a good job in Darlington Council, which was fab. Still pursuing what I needed to do, got myself a flat, built myself up a little life, met somebody, went on to have my first child, Connor, which was fab, but obviously I wasn't healed in any way, shape or form. Yeah. My life went on and on and on, and then into the year 2012, I literally couldn't cope any longer with the fact that this abuser had got away with what he'd got away with, and the Crown Prosecution Service wouldn't take the case. So this one random night, decided I was going to come to Sunderland and put posters all over, naming and shaming him.
Wow.
As a means to getting a conviction.
Well, it's that sense of revenge that you said before about just having those little seeds, and actually it's anger, it's justified anger, it's all of those things, but that seed of revenge is still there, isn't it? And also, but also justice. You're wanting to see him
totally
pay for what he's done.
And I was also kind of like so consumed with what if he's doing it to someone else, you know, as you get older you start thinking of these things.
And when you have children as well.
Yes, totally. And by this time I had 2 children. So sadly was totally addicted to a drug, actually amphetamine. I'm happy to share that, that's fine. It's not my life now, so was probably just slowly dying, to be fair, emotionally, physically. It was awful. In this short period after I'd put in the posters up, I came back home and...
This is in Bishop Auckland, yeah?
In Bishop Auckland, yeah, and literally the kids had gone into nursery and daycare, and I just couldn't cope anymore, and I actually rang 999 and told them I wanted to die.
Gosh.
And it was just awful. I wasn't getting the support from the person I was with, and it was just awful. Like, I felt quite emotional talking about that, because the services didn't actually do anything to help us, which is sad.
Yeah.
They wanted me to just take myself to Darlington Hospital for an assessment. Now, when you're in a situation where you're sitting on the kitchen floor with a knife in your hand, telling 999 you want to die, you want someone to come and get you.
Yeah.
And they wanted me to go and take myself to the hospital, and of course I didn't.
Yeah.
You know, like, what have I done? Why did I do that? What if I lose my kids? What if? All of the what ifs.
Yeah, sure.
And just totally and utterly lost my mind, and I didn't know at the time that I was suffering from a really bad water infection. I just had this back pain, obviously because of the drug use. And went to bed on this particular night, and the whole time that I was suffering like this, I kept saying all of the time, please, 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 somebody save me. Please, please, I need somebody help me.
I just feel emotional when you're talking. I'm like, wow.
It's just awful. It was
That's
awful.
the cry, isn't it? That's the cry of your heart. Someone just come and save me, come scoop me up and rescue me.
I want to go home, somebody please. I don't want to live this life. This is not what I want for my kids. Just somebody please save us. And this night I had, the only way I can at the time I knew it was actually a healing event, incident, situation. I was laid on my bed in absolute agony with this back pain, not knowing it was the water infection that had eventually gone to my kidneys. I should have been admitted into hospital, but didn't go to the doctors. And I was kind of like raised off I felt like my spirit was raised off my bed, and this healing occurred, and by the time I was put back down onto the bed, the pain had gone.
Wow.
And then a couple of hours later I woke up and Jesus was just there. And bearing in mind there's no religion, as I've already said, in my family, I just knew it was Jesus. I just knew. It was just amazing. I can't even begin to explain. And like, at first I'm thinking, am I cracking up here? I've had drugs, like, what the hell, like, is this me just totally losing my mind? But I just, hand on heart, know it was him, his presence, love, surrounded by the most amazing light. I can't even begin to explain how it was. It was just lovely. And from the following day, I didn't touch another drug.
Isn't that the most incredible thing? Not only was your body physically healed from a really dangerous infection and medical problem, but also something happened in your spirit that meant a generational pattern, a thing that's just in your thinking, in your normal, just gone.
Totally. It was. I remember I was travelling somewhere and I was driving, sadly, and I had some drugs. And I just threw them out of the car window into this field and said, like, never again.
Wow.
Never. And it was a Christmas period, and obviously all of my friends are still doing it, but I was still going and seeing them and managing and not wanting to touch another thing. And it was just absolutely amazing. And then fast forward a couple of weeks later, decided I wanted to pursue a church. Find a church, I really want this is amazing, I really want, telling people, and no, I'm not cracking up, I promise you. I saw it was Jesus, and everyone was like, yes, whatever, Alison, like, you've been in a state, and you've been, and I was like, no, honestly, I'm honestly, telling the doctors, and they must have, I do think the doctors were thinking I was totally losing my mind, how I wasn't sectioned at the time, I don't know, but stumbled into a Catholic church, because it was at the top of my street, and it was they were chanting, "Forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned. Forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned," and it was just way too much. Like, I was thinking, no, this is too heavy. This is not what I want. It's weird. I was thinking, so I ended up into the spiritualism.
Yeah.
And could have developed and whatever else, but didn't. Something was always stopping us.
Wow.
So, and obviously that was God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot more to my story. Like, I've suffered domestic violence, sexual exploitation when I was younger, by groups of men in the area where I lived, shoplifting, crime, and I just cannot believe the transformation. And then once I met you, Rachel, we ventured to Teesside one Sunday.
Yeah.
For a big celebration.
Yeah, one of our Taking Ground celebrations where all of the churches from the Taking Ground network get together.
Yeah.
We worship, somebody speaks, it's just this wonderful celebration of our unity and also that, but it was great. I mean, you'd been coming to our little gathering, but to come and see that and see a different expression of church. So what happened there?
I remember, I think it was Linda. Linda was praying at the front, and Linda, she's lovely. I love her. She's got such a lovely character, and just love. There's just love surrounds her. But she'd mentioned something along the lines of, if you feel ready to give your life to God, please come down and we'll pray for you. So I went to the front and I just remember crying. She hugged us and I cried.
Wow.
And then we did a ladies' event on forgiveness, and I sobbed. Something that day took the whole, I felt awful for the things I put my children through. I couldn't forgive myself for what I'd done in the past, and it was just lovely. It was just such a surreal thing. And then I ended up being baptised at Sunderland, at our church in 2014. So that's
8 years ago, Alison.
It's 8 years ago, it totally is, yeah.
So talk to me now about life with God. Talk to me about, I mean, there's all that generational stuff, there's all that hurt, there's all that brokenness in your past, and you've encountered the healing of God emotionally and physically. Life now with God.
I mean, life now, there's been a lot of things after, but I just know that he's with us. I know that regardless of what's going on, he's with me, and I wholeheartedly believe that if I hadn't have been saved that night by Jesus, it could have been a very different story. And God talks to me in dreams, and I see visions and little snippets of things that encourage me all of the time to keep going, to keep pursuing what I want to pursue. I've gone on this huge journey of self-educating myself on lots of different things, you know.
You've done a course on everything, you have.
I have, and it's literally, just everything about it. I can't begin to explain. If I'd had photographs of me back then to now, it's just nothing short of amazing.
Transformation, absolutely.
I do know as well, there's something stirring in Sunderland. God is at work in Sunderland, and I can feel it in my heart that something amazing is going to happen in my hometown, in this area, and it's on the hearts of lots of Christians, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I feel like everyone we meet, we're like, oh, something's happening.
Yeah, totally. And I do know that in some shape or form I'm going to be part of that. And I just can't be thankful enough for God putting you on my path, Rachel. Matt, I love Matt, he's fab. I think, and it's going to make me quite emotional, you guys are the first healthy relationship I've ever seen in my life. And I'm getting emotional because I didn't actually know what a healthy relationship was. And so I put up with behaviours, and I put up with being treated the way I was treated for a long, long time because I thought that was the norm. So I can't begin to explain how meeting Eunice and Andrew and you and Matt has totally changed my life. I'm sorry for upsetting you.
You're making me cry, gosh. That's going to be an emotional one, guys.
And to bear in mind, that's huge. That is huge.
And it's massive because not just for you, but actually for the impact for your children. You know, you've got 4 beautiful, amazing kids who now have an opportunity to see something different. And their life gets to be different. And I think one of the things that happens when we meet Jesus, not only does our life change, but the trajectory of our families change as well.
Totally.
And you've had your kids dedicated in our church, and we still need to do your little one. But actually, what's amazing is that before the trajectory would have been the same as what yours was.
Totally.
And now it isn't. And it isn't because not only have you encountered something, but you can pray over them. You've got now the authority to pray over their lives. That God's going to meet with them. God's going to change their life, and He's got a plan and a purpose for their life. And that's exciting.
It is exciting, and you know, I just think to myself, like, it's actually huge. It's the things that God's done in my life. It's nothing short of amazing. And quite a lot of the time I was chatting to you about scripture. And I do struggle with scripture, but this past, I would say, a month, that everything is relevant. Everything that happened in the course of my life with Jesus showing Himself to me, with the events before that, with how I was begging someone to come and save us, it's all in scripture. There is an actual passage that I read last night, and it just said it perfectly, and it was something along the lines of he who seeks, if I can just find it. Well, anyway, it was something along the lines of he who seeks shall be saved, or something
that's amazing. There was a couple of other passages that you were gonna share, which kind of sum up a little bit of your life. But as you find them, I was just gonna say, you know, in our walks with God, there are seasons where it's harder to pray, or it's hard to worship, or it's hard to read the Bible, or it's hard to whatever. And we can beat ourselves up over that a little bit, can't we? I think we can be like, oh no, I'm not praying enough, or I'm not doing this enough. But actually, God is just doing so much in us in those times, and there will be something else that you dip into. Like you say, like you pray all the time. You go on little prayer walks all the time. I know we text each other, don't we? You're on a little prayer walk or whatever.
I do.
And you'll say like, oh, God showed me this, or God showed me this, but then you found reading the Bible hard. Whereas now you moved into a different season where actually the word's just speaking to you all the time. And I think we can beat ourselves up over not being perfect in every aspect of our walk with God, but actually God doesn't require that of us. He doesn't require us to be perfect. He just meets us and he just shows us, and in the right time he's going to reveal way more to us. It's good.
So I was totally, well, I didn't know at the time, but obviously I know now that quite a lot of my life was attacked by the devil, by strongholds, and I've done a lot of work to kind of lift them, and this really struck a chord with me yesterday. So it's James 4:7, submit yourselves to God, resist the devil and he will flee from you. And that is certainly what has happened to me. It's just, you know, when you read, it's just amazing, and people might say the Bible's boring, and I actually thought that, but when I'm reading things and it's just like, God, yes, that is so good. And I really like this Ephesians 6:13, therefore take up the whole armour of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. And I do actually stand firm in my beliefs now. I really want to find that psalm, so if you just bear with us.
Of course.
Because this was the one that totally hit home with me. So it's, the enemy pursues me, he crushes me to the ground, he makes me dwell in the darkness like those long dead.
Wow.
And
you can sort of see that of your past, can't you?
Yeah, totally.
Wow.
And then the turnaround from me begging, somebody help me, and then God actually delivering that.
Will someone not save me? And it's as if God's got this big plan to save us, hasn't he? And he just does. He's got this amazing plan. Alison, it's such a privilege to hear your story in its fullness. I found it emotional because I've walked different parts of it with you, but to hear it in a big wanna like that, it's quite big, it's emotional.
And that's quite a snipped version. But the book is going to come.
Oh, she's going to write a book.
I'm going to have I'm in the process of writing a book, and the title of the book is going to be And Along Came Jesus, or Then There Was Jesus, something or like something along the lines.
Sounds amazing.
It'll be a good read.
Alison, with every guest I have on the podcast, I ask them to just share if there is a worship song or a lyric from a worship song that's just speaking to you at the moment, that God's just encouraging you with. Have you got one for me?
I have, and this morning I was actually listening to I Am a Child of God, and I love it. Music really speaks to me. Really, I take on the emotional vibe from music, and that is the one, I Am a Child of God.
And that's amazing, isn't it? Because particularly with your background and all of that kind of stuff, we've been doing a bit on identity, haven't we, at church, and just the sense of, no, hang on, before anything else, before whatever, I was created, I was purposed, I am a child of God.
Which I now know.
You now know.
And I didn't know that before. So yes, I am loved, yes, I am protected, and thankfully it's going to go on for generations after me, which I'm so excited about.
Yeah, bless you. Thanks, Alison.
Okay, thanks, Rach.
We hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If you've got a story to tell, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear it. You can contact us at podcast@takingground.org.uk. See you next time.